He was read into a program that we collected a being that they called Eben, the Roswell, I think it was the Roswell being, that he has seen photos of that event, of that craft, and that basically he was read in. Well, basically what David Grusch says pretty much without detailing Roswell does fit with what Richard Doty said, does fit with what Bob Lazar said as well. So supposedly they had an Air Force linguist that was the handler for that being, that was at least one being that came from Roswell. And apparently he says there were other beings. He said the pilots were inside certain craft.
This is Meredith for Real, the Curious Introvert, and I'm Meredith. I explore the questions people think but don't ask out loud, either because they're taboo or thanks to cultural hypnosis. My mission, and yours if you choose to accept it, is to inspire curiosity by exploring the nuance and paradox of our world. Each episode is different, so bring your ADD and your earbuds and have a look around. Hey, Curiositors, it's me, Meredith. We are doing this thing. In the news you may have missed category, aliens and their crafts are here and in the possession of the U.S. government. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. The topic of phenomenon hits 3 sweet spots for this show. It's taboo, it's real, and it's not being talked about for some reason. And that's kind of what we do here, explore the taboo, the nuance, and the paradox of our world. If you're new here, each week is totally different than the last, and it's ADD approved. And this week, we are getting up to date on the alien and UFO situation thanks to my guest who did a great job of breaking it down into bite-sized pieces. We cover how we know that David Grusch is legit. What's the difference between whistleblowing and data leaking? What kinds of crafts are in possession of the U.S. government? And are aliens trying to help or harm us? It's great stuff. And if you're a repeat listener, I appreciate you so much. I'd love if you could appreciate me back by tapping those stars on the Apple Podcast app. And you don't have to write a review. You can just leave a star rating, and that will tell future guests and sponsors that what we do here is pretty awesome, and they should be a part of it too. Lastly, if you end up liking this episode, you'll also like the one I did with the co-founder of the website that originally reported the David Grusch story, the debrief.org's Tim McMillan. We covered the Pentagon's disclosure that UFOs are in fact real. It's episode 95. All right, friends, keep it curious. What do Contact, War of Worlds, Signs, and Men in Black all have in common? They're somebody's favorite UFO movie. Mine is Arrival, in case you're curious. These movies are an escape from reality, where we watch our favorite actors solve new world problems. But what if those scenarios are no longer science fiction? In 2017, videos of the now famous Tic Tac flying objects were leaked to the public to then be officially released by the Pentagon in 2020. You might remember this from the episode 95 with Tim McMillan. That's when the UAP task force was established to investigate sightings reports of what most people still call UFOs. Among the task force was an intelligence officer named David Grusch, an Air Force veteran from Pittsburgh. Fast forward to 2023, where Grusch has now become a whistleblower against the task force, saying they illegally withheld information from Congress about retrieved intact and partially intact crafts and pilots of non-human origin. My next guest is a retired United States Air Force Special Operations Aviator, civilian pilot, and yogi. With a bachelor's in history and a passion for the natural world, he follows his curiosity to explore the supernatural world as one of the hosts of Calling All Beings, a podcast that explores capital P phenomenon. And today, he's going to give us the scoop on the Grusch whistleblower claims and answer the question, are aliens invading Earth? Ufologist, enthusiast, loves him a good Hawaiian shirt, DJ SanMarco. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Meredith for Rizzle. How are you, my friend?
I am
good to see you.
So good. I am so happy that we can have this conversation because this is one of those topics that is really hard as just like a person on the peripheral of this subject to learn about because it's changing a lot lately. It's not like a static topic that you can go and read about on a Saturday morning. It's something that people like you stay up to date with daily. So I'm glad that you're here, that we can have this little tidbit of information. So I think because most of my audience is probably not someone who follows this all the time, let's start with the basics of how do we know that this David Grusch guy is legit?
Well, he's been through several levels of review from serious people. So they talk about Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean, who along with Helene Cooper did the 2017 groundbreaking article that we had U.S. Navy pilots who had encountered Tic Tac aircraft off the coast of California. So there's that. Collectively, I mean, Ralph Blumenthal had 30 years at the New York Times, I think, or 40 years, and also Leslie Kean had time at the New York Times. Then you have the debrief with your former guest, Tim McMillan, that went through his process. He's connected to government. Then Colonel Kell came out in that article and said, I'm flag officer, colonel, or captain of the Navy. And he came out and said, I worked on the UAP task force, and what he's telling you is true. He's genuine, and so forth. Then I did my own. I contacted somebody in naval intelligence who had connected themselves to the UAP task force when Grusch was there. And when I said, did you vet David? This gentleman said, people a lot higher than me have vetted David. He is a wonderkid when it comes to intelligence analysts. He can do things that other people can't do, has figured out things, not to mention that he has a degree in physics as it relates to this topic. So essentially, he said, but yes, I developed a personal friendship with him. News Nation did their due diligence on him as well. Ross Coulthart did his due diligence on him as well. And he has connections all over government, has been on this topic. He's former Australian 60 Minutes host.
So it's not like this is a National Enquirer episode, article that's come out. I watched the interview that he did, and he does present very Boy Scouty. And so he seems like the kind of person, I hope it's okay that I say that. I don't mean that with any disrespect. It's just that he just really reminds me of the guy that always drives the speed limit and drives 10 and 2. You know what I mean? So he presents in a way that's very logical and a Mr. I do the right thing, which made the whistleblower part of it very confusing to me, because when most people think of a whistleblower, when I think of a whistleblower, I think of secret meetings in hotel rooms after which the person will live in hiding for their whole life. But when the story was first released on the debrief.org, the journalists Leslie and Ralph said, and I quote, in accordance with protocols, Grusch provided the Defense Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review at the Department of Defense with the information he intended to disclose to us. His on-the-record statements were all, quote, cleared for open publication on April 4th and 6th, 2023, in documents provided to us, end quote. What kind of whistleblowing is this where you tell the people, hey, I'm going to rat you out?
So we have to make the distinction between a leaker, like an Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, who goes and takes classified information, brings it directly VFR, direct to the media, and discloses that information. Those people, would they come back into the country, they'd be arrested and tried. What David did was follow a process. He went to the Inspector General. We're told, which is not as widely reported, but is reported, that he went to the DOD Inspector General first when he discovered this. That is when it was him trying to get access to these programs that were back engineering, captured and crashed craft of unknown, or let's call it non-human intelligence origin. That's when he began to be harassed. That's when it started to become illegal on the other side. And that's when he went and he got his lawyer, and then he disclosed he had done 4 years of investigation on this. And that's when he decided, okay, I need to come forward. I've spoken to multiple groups of people who don't know each other, but know of these programs and know the program names. And so then he went forward to the Intelligence Community Inspector General legally, and all of that testimony that you heard that he gave to before, that he had already, what he gave to Congress is probably the classified version. The unclassed version that you and I heard on News Nation is what was cleared by the DOPSR process within Pentagon.
Oh, okay. That makes sense, because in the interview, he was asked questions and he answered them. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not cleared to answer that question. And I was thinking, dude, you're a whistleblower. Like, can't you answer all the questions? But again, I am the uninitiated, so I'm kind of learning about this process. And also, this concept is new, right? Because before, everything was hidden behind closed doors, not accessible. But the whole point of the UAP task force is disclosure and accountability. And the reason that Grusch is partially blowing the whistle on it is because he feels like they are not following the mission statement of disclosure and accountability. Am I right?
There's two components. There's a legal and a moral component to it. The illegality part of it, that as he sees it or as he has uncovered, is that Congress is not able to provide oversight on these programs, yet they're paying for it.
Oh.
So that part right there makes it illegal because they are funding something under a contract name, but in fact, probably contract line item numbers or CLINs underneath that contract are these programs, but they don't know that they're funding that. So it does not have congressional oversight. That's A. B, there's a component that talks about intimidation, that talks about harassment, that it probably goes beyond legal. And then the moral component is he believes that after 7 decades to 8 decades of this, maybe getting close on Roswell, that they have not brought in enough and not open source, but brought in aspects from maybe the best and brightest that we have in America at these different universities we have that could maybe have solved a major problem like propulsion, like zero carbon emission energy and these sorts of things. And by just having, also he talked about a sole source arrangement, that if a defense contractor was given a sole source arrangement where it didn't go out in a RFP, a request for proposal, to get a myriad of different groups who maybe do have access to university professors and grad students, right, that could get cleared and then get read into the program. So he thinks from that standpoint, we're not leveraging everything we could out of the technology that he knows, that from documentation, from videos, from photos, that we have going, that we have these programs, but he doesn't think we've gotten enough out of it. That's the moral component of his argument.
It's so interesting to hear a military person in a task force say that it's inefficient because, on the civilian side, we always joke about how government agencies and task forces and all those things are, of course, they're inefficient. So to hear like a military person of his stature say, hey guys, this is not legal, it's not moral, and we're missing out on making the real progress that we want to make, it's just totally foreign. It's just like such a new concept to wrap my head around.
Here's one look at it. Let's say that I'm a talent recruiter, you're a talent recruiter in Pensacola, and then out in California in Newport Beach, Kate Casey's a talent recruiter. And she's, was in the White House in the 90s. She has a lot of contacts. You have a lot of contacts. I have a lot of contacts. But the only people I'm recruiting from is from my pool that I know through AFSOC. So this is just fictitious. I'm just making an example. But what if I were to bring in you and Kate and say, hey, Meredith, Kate, what are the best and brightest that you guys know in these different institutions, in these different companies maybe that are recruiting at great universities, scientists, engineers, and so forth, that we could leverage against this problem? We're trying to problem solve, but yet I'm only using me as the talent recruiter and everybody for the last decade that has looked at this this material and at these craft are people that I recruited. Is that the best and the brightest? That's what he's saying.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. It's a limited pool. And I listened to the Micah Hanks show. His podcast is really also a really great podcast. And he made a good point that there is some potential that the U.S. government could be using David Grusch for the purpose of disinformation, to tell our enemy nations that these technologies are not from Earth in order to intimidate them, because they're not of Earth and we're in possession of them. That's the key part of that, right? Like, we have these huge, powerful technologies that are out of this world, literally. And so you better not mess with us and don't mess with Taiwan. And if we also decide to deploy said technologies to collect information or to engage in acts of war, we have plausible deniability. We can be like,
It wasn't us. It was the spacemen.
So David Grusch spoke to that, right? He said there's a Cold War of capturing down craft. So for what reason would they do that? I mean, they could allude to it. And first of all, I don't think he would be complicit in it and then have, first of all, quit his GS-15 job with the government, then also relinquish his commission with U.S. Air Force Reserves, both things that he treasured. Those are career-defining positions so that he could be a whistleblower for the government, but it's fake news. And then we already know that the Russians have a program and they know we have a program. That doesn't make any sense. There's no common sense there. He said we've already been there, have captured down craft also. We know that. But we are America. We are rebels. And while the UK will not even answer an email from Christopher Sharp or any of these journalists that we know who cover this wonderfully for their country, they won't answer a question about this. We're Americans. When we see something we don't like, we do something about it. There's David Grusch. There's David Fravor. There's Alex Dietrich. There's Lou Elizondo. If these other countries had individuals like that, of that fiber and that sort of a revolutionary spirit, if you will, right? That's us from the beginning. Then they would have a breakthrough and they would have to talk about it. The only reason our government is talking about this is because of Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon got those videos released in 2017, or you and I are not having this conversation.
Yeah, isn't that so interesting? I would encourage anybody who hasn't gone back and followed the trail of events since 2017. I mean, you don't have to go all the way back to like 1940, but definitely go back to 2017 because it is really fascinating to see how all of the right people were in the right place at the right time. And I think the American public is a little bit more primed to kind of accept this information. And I want to get into the juicy stuff in a second, like the craft and the aliens. But I just have one more kind of basic question that I want to get out of the way before we do that. And that's about what I can only call just a constant rebranding on behalf of the U.S. government. Because UFOs were what we called them forever. Now they're UAPs. Aliens are now called NIH, non-human intelligence. Alien invaders are simply called pilots. ATIP is now Arrow. You're a military guy. I mean, is the government purposely trying to make this complicated jargon to confuse the general public? What's going on?
Actually not in this case. You're there near Navy Pensacola. You know, you've done a lot of stuff over there. Let's say if what they're doing is not what we call flight. What is flight? Flight to us is Bernoulli's theorem, right? As velocity, and we're talking about a wing form when you look out the side of your 737 as you're headed to Dallas to get your connection somewhere, or Atlanta. As velocity increases over the wing, pressure decreases on top of the wing. Now you have powered flight. It's the same from the Wright brothers to the stealth aircraft to the F-22 to the F-35. There's no difference in the way they fly with the exact same concept. What if these craft like a Tic Tac don't have a wing? So they have omnidirectional propulsion that go up, down, left, right, at will, hover, and do all this without any thermodynamic signature like a jet engine exhaust, right? Or a contrail that you see when they're up at 36,000 feet. So is that flight? I think we would argue it's not flight as we understand it. They're moving through our airspace, but they're not flying. Now, that's part A of your question, right? So I understand unidentified aerial phenomena. But if we say unidentified anomalous phenomenon, we can then talk about USOs, undersea, right? Anomalous objects, okay? So submarines are seeing these things transmedium. Jeremy Corbell has documented this. He is somebody that I believe the Navy likes to give videos to for some reason. I don't know why he's been chosen, but I know that nobody is going to risk leaking a video from the bridge or from the CIC or something on a ship to give Jeremy a video to then be thrown in the brig next week and be in Leavenworth about 4 weeks later. So these objects are seen transmedium. They're in the air and they go into the water, but they go into the water in such a way that they're not displacing the water the way that a solid craft would. Submarines are clocking them at something like Mach underwater.
Underwater?
So that's something that's
Mach?
Yeah, underwater. Right. So we're talking about where there's not the hydrodynamic drag doesn't affect them, or hydrostatic drag the way it would when we push a submarine through the water or any undersea object. So that's part of ARROW, all anomalous domain, all anomalous resolution office. I never knew before, I'd say the last 24 months, that there was an undersea component to this. Although we've heard it, we even heard Dave Fravor tell a story like this. So yeah, don't understand it, don't know what's going on with it, but that is a part of the phenomenon and why they keep having to change it to just air, because it's not only in the air that they're being seen.
Wow. So all of the changing acronyms and jargon is just an effort to keep up with a more accurate description of what's actually happening. That is so fascinating. Oh my gosh.
This is why it's so difficult for people to we have our trouble with it, you know?
Yeah. Well, just right when you said, well, because technically what is flying, I'm like, oh, mind blown. You're so right. Grusch said that there were several intact and partially intact crafts and pilots of non-human origin in the possession of the U.S. government at a private aerospace company. I want your theory on what you think that company is later. But the crafts, what kind of crafts? What do they look like? How big are they? What do you know about that?
So as far as what kind of crafts, he said, the saucer shape isn't the du jour craft that we're seeing lately. He talks about the Tic Tac, obviously, there have been multiples of those that have been seen. Obviously, what that our Navy brother Ryan Graves has seen, which is the cube inside of the sphere inside a cube that's flying. Okay, that doesn't fly. In our logic, that does a pyramid, the green pyramid doesn't fly. A cube doesn't fly, doesn't generate lift. So there's something else going on there that we don't understand.
So they have a cube and a Tic Tac and a triangle in possession?
Oh, no, I'm talking about these are what's seen. As far as what the actual shape of the craft that they have, we haven't learned that yet in open source. He hasn't spoken about it. The only thing that he did mention is he did mention triangular craft, and he said they mentioned some have been seen that are the size of a football field, and he thought that was very concerning.
Oh.
Because of the sheer size of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting, because if there are cultures that can create the technology that doesn't experience drag underwater and that can make, shoeboxes fly efficiently, then yeah, why would it be so big if it weren't incredibly powerful as well? That is interesting. Talk to me about the pilots, because when I interviewed Tim McMillan, we kind of had this whole back and forth about aliens, and he said that it was a strong possibility that much of what we see in the sky are unmanned drones, if you will. So yes. I hadn't thought very much about aliens since that time, because I thought, wow, that's incredibly logical. Yes, of course, we send unmanned drones to explore the outermost corners, for us anyway, of space. Why wouldn't they? So have you heard anything about the pilots, who they are, where they come from? Any details?
So not where they come from, but Richard Doty, who was Air Force OSI at Kirtland Air Force Base in the late 70s, early 80s during the Reagan administration. They had a contractor on base who was reporting that he was seeing UFOs and was starting to collect information on these sightings using various electronic and visual means that were available at the time. But they were firing some classified signals and using some different laser light patterns up into the sky that they were basically trying to blind Russian satellites that were coming overhead and would be filming Kirtland Air Force Base. And so he says that he was read into a program because of that. He was meant to give disinformation and make this gentleman believe that it was UFOs, when in fact the majority of while there has been he said there was a couple incidents of UFOs at Kirtland, what he was seeing was classified activity that we were doing against our adversaries. So he says he was read into a program that we collected, being that they called EBIN, the Roswell, I think it was the Roswell being, that he has seen photos of that event, of that craft, and that basically he was read in. Well, basically what David Grusch says, pretty much without detailing Roswell, does fit with what Richard Doty said, does fit with what Bob Lazar said as well. So supposedly they had an Air Force linguist that was the handler for that being, that was at least one being that came from Roswell. And apparently he says there were other beings. He said the pilots were inside certain craft. We don't know which ones. We're left to speculate. And I also agree with you that most of the platforms we're seeing now, it would seem, are doing surveillance, are doing ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. But that's looking at it through a human's point of view, what they're doing.
Right.
But just by flying around and looking and listening, that's surveillance of one sort or another as we see it.
You said
So,
linguists,
but yes.
so they were alive.
Yes, he said it lived for a couple of years. They called it Eben or Eben or something is the word I've heard a couple of times from different sources, and that being died. But an Air Force linguist was the handler for that being.
Holy smokes. I mean, that's literally that movie with Amy Adams. Oh, that's crazy. Oh my gosh. Well, you just said something else about, disinformation and yada, yada.
Yeah.
I want to know, what do you think this disclosure, this whistleblowing event, how do you think it will impact the trust between the American people and the U.S. government?
Man, that's really hard to say because people have varying levels of trust in the government. People have very little knowledge of the government to start with. People will say things like, oh, the government can't keep secrets. And that's just not true. As David himself said in that interview, He said, I know a lot of secrets that will never see the light of day. I was read into a TSSCI program during part of my military career, part of my civilian career. There's not one person all the cabbies, they haven't heard one story out of me of one mission that not to say that they would want to know about it. But some people think special operations is cool. They would want to know, but they're never going to know because I'm not going to talk about it. I don't have a need to tell people about it. And there are hundreds of thousands of people like me who have been read into programs and don't talk about it. And now there are leaks that happen. And that's how we have already heard what David Grusch has now confirmed. Richard Doty talked about it. He said people came to his house and took his laptop at one point to see what was on there. But obviously in the 80s, Bob Lazar came out and George Knapp did a very thorough investigation of the background of Bob Lazar, and people could just dismiss him and say, he's a kook. I don't even know if he ever went and took these classes. I don't know. Meanwhile, they found an article in the Los Alamos newspaper about him and referred to what his job was in this rocket-powered car. So it is conceivable that EG&G might have hired him to work at a secret place in Nevada, right? And if they said, well, we talked to those schools and they said he never went here. Well, I guarantee you, if somebody of a certain government authority walked into my college and said SanMarco doesn't exist, I would cease to have existed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of authority that they have, right? Grusch also talked about people being harmed handling these materials.
Yeah.
He has an issue with that. He talked about people being killed, possibly by a non-human intelligence, murdered. He used that word. I mean, Ross, and he shared that word to codify exactly. We're talking about murder here, yes. Also, just happenstance. Gary Nolan's talked about when you are around the energy sources that make these aircraft fly, people are experiencing internal injury and damage.
The technology is so unknown and so advanced that it'll be really interesting to see where and how we study these crafts safely, because we are not only dealing with unknown technologies that are from two different places, right? So it's not like, this is not like grandpa's diesel engine. And we're also talking about a variety of motives, because we know lots of experiencers who report very benign interactions with non-human intelligence. But then Grusch was saying, hey, they're not necessarily all of goodwill towards humans, which checks out. Some humans really suck, and I wouldn't want them representing us to other non-human intelligence. But if they're so advanced, why do they let us see them, and why do they keep crashing? We're going to take a quick break to highlight the businesses that support the show. When we come back, you'll hear, if UFOs are so advanced, why do they let us see them and why do they crash? And are aliens trying to help us or harm us? My husband and I have been using Liquid IV since 2019. We love that you put it in cold water and it actually dissolves, and it tastes awesome. I just tried the new strawberry lemonade flavor, and it's my new favorite. If you follow me on Instagram, you also know that I recently started diving, and I am on the foot cramp struggle bus. Thankfully, in just one stick, I get 5 essential vitamins and hydrated 2 times faster than water alone. Get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use code CURIOUS at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code CURIOUS at liquidiv.com. Summer is in full swing, and so are the mosquitoes, and that can be a real buzzkill. See what I did there? I've been using Insect's mosquito service since 2019, and they continue to impress me. They guarantee their work, and pollinators are always top of mind. Don't wait till the last minute to get on their schedule, though. If you're in the Florida Panhandle or the Gulf Coast of Alabama, give Insect a call, ensec.net. If you watch the show on YouTube, then you see the beautiful backdrop of Trader John's, the exhibit where I record the show inside the Pensacola Museum of History. This is just one museum under the umbrella of the UWF Historic Trust. If you're planning a trip to Pensacola and need an indoor activity option, pick up a ticket. It's good for a whole week. Get your tickets in person so you can show the agent one of my emails and get $2 off an adult ticket. Now back to the show. Remember to stay till the end where I give you a sneak peek of next week's episode.
Well, first of all, anytime you have something that's electromechanical, and Richard Doty posited this theory, what if you had a craft that was used to not flying within our atmosphere or operating in the atmosphere, and then it experienced an electrical storm? And you have a craft where they say that possibly instead of having a lot of wire bundles and cables, like I could take you and open up the cowlings of any aircraft in our inventory, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and you would see very similar ways that they're put together. The way that we bundle cables and use ADEL clamps and cannon plugs and have circuit boards and LR line replaceable units. What people say is, what if the skin of this craft, that there are waveguides in the skin of this craft, and that to some degree they're operated with consciousness. It is that the craft is semi-conscious and that you're interacting with it in a conscious way. And from an electrical standpoint, the skin again has waveguides. Now you introduce what they would consider an electrical anomaly, a thunderstorm, something that's fairly unique to our atmosphere. Could that be a crash? Yeah. He also said that there are some that he said craft have landed and it appeared they just walked away from it. He said that.
Really?
Yes.
I missed that part. I watched that whole interview, man. I don't know what happened.
That totally flips everything that we know about flight and consequences on its head. The storage part, being stored at a private aerospace company. Do you have any theories on where it might be stored?
No, I can't speculate on that, because that would be, you would have to know that with 100% certainty before you ascribed a name to that. What I can say, my personal hypothesis is that the majority of what we have would be under physical custodial control of the government at a government secure facility, with contractors being brought in to analyze and work with that and have access to that material on a daily working basis. And that there may have been some where, as he used the term hand receipted, we know that from the military. If I were to give you were going to get ready to deploy and I needed to give you a piece of hardware to take overseas in your deployment, Meredith, I would have you fill out a hand receipt, which I could then show to my superiors. I am no longer responsible for this. Meredith Edwards signed for it. She will bring it back when she comes back from deployment. Now I'm absolved. Okay. So there may be arrangements like that where material has been hand receipted over and is at a very secure facility. Now, is that facility on a base? I know bases where contractors have secure facilities with barbed wire and extra guards around their building. that you have to badge into just to get in the fence line of that building. So do you see how it can get really complicated?
Yeah.
But I would assert personally, I've said this from the beginning of when I started talking about UFOs, to what I know is most of them, if not all, but most, would be under direct government control, with contractors being granted access for the purpose of them going out, seeking talent, bringing them in, letting them look at it, seeing if they can make something of it for a prescribed period of time, and then sent packing if they cannot. And yes, there may be some that are at even an off-site facility that isn't owned by the government, but I would suspect most of them are in the fence line of a government facility somewhere.
Oh my God. Can you imagine being that contractor? Being able to you open the door and you walk through, and there is a spaceship. It's kind of cool. I mean, that would be amazing. That would just be so cool. Unless you got injured or hurt or dead, then that would be cool, obviously. But I mean, from a technology point of view, from a life event point of view, I can see why you have mentioned that you feel like this is the biggest news. What did you say, in history? You felt like it was really significant.
Recorded history. Yeah. This is the biggest story in recorded history, because it answers that age-old question, whether we're alone or not. And this is the highest ranked, most cleared, most vetted individual ever that has come out and said, yes, this is a thing. And I've done 4 years of research into this before I've come forward to make sure that what I'm telling you, I know to be true. And people obviously have proved it to his satisfaction before he went home and told his wife, hey, honey, guess what? I just gave up my GS-15 job with retirement.
Right.
Suffice it to say, Meredith, and for everybody out there, there's some putting your money where your mouth is. Anybody can go on the internet and talk. Anybody can go on even a cable news show and flap their gums. Once you start telling me I gave up my career and my position because I thought this was legally and morally of the highest level of importance. And by the way, what I've said was deemed urgent and credible by the ICIG, which is the Intelligence Community Inspector General. And my lawyer, by the way, was that Inspector General. So he went through his own analysis. So we talk about layers of vetting. Mr. McCullough, his lawyer, I think his name is Charles McCullough. I'm not positive. He was formerly with the Rose Law Firm. He left the law firm to continue representing David. And he is a former IG. So that's another layer of guy that has to say, I'm putting my career on the line because I believe what he says. And I think the egregiousness of what's been done to people in the name of this is at a level that is urgent, incredible.
What's the significance of his lawyer now, however, no longer choosing to represent him?
Well, that's not what happened. The law firm chose not to continue doing business with David Grusch. What I was saying to you in the audience is Charles McCullough left Rose Law Firm to continue representing David.
See, that's why I like talking to you, because there's a gap between the headlines and the details of the headlines. And I think the average American who maybe is not as interested in this topic as, people who are really into ufology, they're not necessarily reading all the articles, right? They're reading the headlines that pop up on their social media feed. I can't believe we're running out of time. I have to ask you this question. We saw an increase in UFOs after the introduction of the atomic bomb, and some theorize that it was a galactic effort to keep us from destroying ourselves. Now, with the emergence of rapid AI and computer brain interfacing, do you think there's any connection there, or if it's just a coincidence?
Well, David spoke to this as well. He said if UFOs or if non-human intelligences writ large were trying to help us, then they wouldn't have let genocide happen in Liberia, or what's going on in Russia right now, or in Nazi Germany or World War II. So unfortunately, it doesn't fit a narrative that we would like to have necessarily, that they're here. What is interesting is that Robert Salas, in his 1967 incident at Malmstrom Air Force Base, where they turned off his battery of missiles and brought them offline. Then there was reportedly a similar incident in Russia, and supposedly there's conversation, he says, between these two nations, that there is a direct line because they actually put Russia's missiles online and started a launch sequence, which they were able to interrupt mechanically, right? So if that's all true, maybe they are messing around with a little bit, but a lot of people believe it was the Trinity project in 45, before the first Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing, that a lot of people believe that sent shock waves through multiple dimensions. Because what David said is, this is important for people to understand who have a difficulty with how many light years it would take to get from one planet to another, or from one end of our galaxy to the other. He said that they may be, I have the quote here, so I'll try to get this. He said that they may be residing in a co-located space.
Yeah, I love the co-located space idea. Like, the part of me that loves the idea of multiple dimensions, and the part of me that loves the show Fringe, to be quite honest, like, loves the idea of a co-located species of humanoids. Like, that's so freaking cool.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. He said he's obviously a physics major, so David is the double threat. He's not just an intelligence analyst that reads and knows and disseminates intelligence information and leverages it. He is also a guy who got his scholarship to college paid for by the Air Force because he was studying physics. So that makes him, at least a graduate, at least a baccalaureate level physicist, if nothing else, which is a lot more than a lot of us could say. He said there is a mathematical theoretical framework that would explain this space, that he says they are co-located with us. We can't see them all the time. So you could understand how if this was the case in 45, which I assume, it was, they would have been shocked to see an explosion on this planet of that gravity, no pun intended. So, and then the subsequent that came later in 45 in Little Man, and obviously that first one, I can't remember, but the two that dropped out of the Enola Gay. So, yeah.
Wow, there's so much here. For my listeners, I want you to know that in the Saturday email that I send out, I'm going to put some good articles for some of the things that are being said so that you can do a rabbit hole of research if you want, because this is a lot to take in, especially audio only. So just my curiositors, I want you to know that you'll get your email, and then all the things that DJ is saying will be referenced so you can go off and learn a little bit more. But as we wrap up,
Meredith, can I say, I want to say one thing that it's important is, I would say this to everybody out there. Don't approach this with fear. What's happening is happening, and it's not something to be scared of. It's not something we're controlling. Just be you, be the best human being you can be. That's all you can do. Don't worry about what is happening. They've been here probably for a very long time, co-located with us, and they are now. The Navy pilots are now seeing him and reporting him. They may have been seen for decades, and I know the pilot community quite well. I've lived and shared meals and flown with these guys and gals. They weren't reporting this stuff. So it's not something to worry about. Just take what it is, see what you can gain from it. Don't hold your hands out in front of you and do the, what's that, the Heisman. This is something that's happening, and just try to take it that way without getting too defensive about it.
Yeah. I want to interview an alien.
I was going to ask you, would you rather see the being or the craft? So if you had two hangars.
Being. 100%.
Okay, I said the being.
Yeah, being. No, I want, I love anthropology. I love soul connection. I love, finding commonalities with people that are extremely different from me. So I'm not joking. Give me the most average alien. I don't want someone who's in charge. I don't want someone with rank. Give me the alien version of me. And I want to talk to him, her, it, whatever. That's what I want. I think that would just be so freaking cool. But my last question for you is about what's next. Because as you said, the Inspector General has stated that this report is urgent and credible. What happens now?
Well, Tim Burchett was looking to head up hearings in the House side. Senator Gillibrand has drafted some language on the Senate side that would give amnesty if people come and report over the next 60 days, regardless of what they report. They can't be prosecuted, DOD civilians, contractors, military, etc. So that, I don't know if that language will be ratified on their side. but Tim Burchett seems pretty serious. Joshua Hawley spoke about this as well. Marco Rubio recently spoke this week. So I think that's next. I think the other next is that there are more people I hear that are going to come forward. I hope so, because I don't want to see Mr. Grusch out there all by his lonesome. So I think more people will come forward and speak in front of the Senate or maybe a joint session. And then I think it'll gain more traction in mainstream media. Right now, people are like, what's on reality TV tonight?
Yeah.
And, they're not paying attention. But it's something to take seriously and to think about, but it's not something to be fearful of. I guess that would be my
No, that's great advice. And I think the debrief.org is an excellent resource for the average person. It's very digestible, it's palatable. And Calling All Beings, your podcast, is great to listen to, after you get some baseline knowledge, because your team of hosts are people that I feel present in a way that gives credibility to the subject matter. And the way that you discuss it is surprisingly academic and really also fun. So tell people where they can find your show and how often you release episodes.
So we usually do about once a week. We're on YouTube, also Calling All Beings on YouTube. And we're on Twitter, Calling All Beings. Myself and Nathan are the co-creators. And then we have several co-hosts. We have Leah, who you met the other night, who's amazing. We have Deb as our researcher. She's one of the originals. We have Matt, who's our Bigfoot investigator. And we have over in the UK, we have Frank, the UFO thinker. So sometimes all six of us be together or groups of us. But yeah, we're on Pod and we're on YouTube and Twitter.
I love it. Thank you so much for this conversation. It'll be really exciting to stay in touch with both the information and you as we go forward and more information comes out.
Yes, ma'am. We want to have you back to co-host again. We just got to find the appropriate episode to invite you on.
All right. I am down. I had so much fun. Thank you so much. And thanks for this.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Do you have an iPhone? If so, I'd be so grateful if you left a rating on Apple Podcasts. It's as easy as tapping on a few stars. You don't have to write a review if you don't want to. Just increasing the number of ratings will tell future guests and sponsors that what we do here is pretty awesome and they should be a part of it too. If you liked this episode, you'll also like the one I did with the co-founder of the website that originally reported the David Grusch story, thedebrief.org's Tim McMillan. We covered the Pentagon's disclosure that UFOs are real. That's episode 95. Stay tuned next week when I mix it up with a new format where I have more of a casual conversation with a fellow podcaster and ADDer, Russ Jones, about our epic ADD fails and what works for us.